Welcome and thank you for joining today's program, From Hesitation to Understanding, talking about mental health together, presented by South Asian Mental Health Initiative and Network, also known as SAMHIN, as part of the East Brunswick Public Library's Just for the Health of It Health Initiative. This program is being recorded and will be posted online after. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Our presenters cannot provide medical advice to the audience. And now I will welcome Dr. Vasudev Makhija and Aanya Jajoo to give their presentation.
So thank you, Maritza, and thank you, East Brunswick Public Library, for arranging this program. I think it's a great opportunity to educate our community about important topics, including today's very important topic. Whenever we watch a good movie or eat a good meal, our first impulse is to share with somebody. You might call your cousin or your friend or your sibling. You just want to tell them about it. But when it comes to sharing our emotions, we tend to be more private. I think we are trained to be private in our community. And that can cause sometimes issues, especially when there is emotional distress, psychological issues, and leading to quiet suffering in the individual. First step is always the hardest in life. So while the first step in starting a conversation is hard, our presenter here today, Aanya Jajoo, will help to take that first step and help you understand why sometimes it's hard to have these conversations and give you some strategies and tips to help you navigate that initial hurdle. So with that, I give it to Anya to give you the presentation.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Dr. Makhija. For starters, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know this topic can feel very personal. Even the phrase talking about mental health at home can bring up a lot of different emotions, maybe discomfort, maybe curiosity, maybe a little bit of fear or relief. And today, we're going to name all of these. The goal is really simple. It's to understand why these conversations can be so hard and to think through small practical ways we can begin them with a little more clarity, compassion, and confidence. Before we get into this conversation, I want to briefly introduce Samhin and the work that makes these spaces possible. SAMHIN stands for South Asian Mental Health Initiative and Network. It's a New Jersey based nonprofit with national reach, and the focus is on mental health awareness, reducing stigma, and improving access to culturally responsive resources. One thing I really appreciate about Samhin's work is that it recognizes that mental health support is not one size fits all. Culture matters, family matters, language matters, community matters. And sometimes people need a bridge between the mental health system and their own family or cultural context. I'm really honored to be leading this session with Dr. Makhija. He's the founder and president of SAMHIN and a board certified psychiatrist and a past president of the New Jersey Psychiatric Association. He's also a distinguished life fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. I also want to briefly introduce myself so you know where I'm coming from in this conversation. So, hi, my name is Anya. I completed my Bachelor's of Science in Psychobiology at UCLA, and I'm currently pursuing my Master's in Mental Health Counseling at Columbia University. I volunteer with Samhin, where I work on sharing resources related to family mental health and stigma research, and my interests are centered around family mental health, especially within South Asian communities. I'm coming to this conversation both as someone who's training in the mental health field and as someone who cares a lot about how these conversations actually happen in real families and in real situations, not just in theory. Tonight, I'm not here to give you a perfect script. I'm here to think with you and think about how we can make these conversations feel a little less impossible. So I want to start with a simple question and feel free to answer in the chat or reflect quietly if you don't feel like sharing. So, when you think about talking about mental health at home, what comes to your mind? You can put one word in the chat if you'd like, or expand if you have more to say. Rebellion, that's an interesting word to use. Some other really big words that I often hear are uncomfortable, risky and rebellion, um, frustrating, emotional. This is kind of exactly why we're starting here, because before we jump into strategies, we want to first understand why this can feel so hard in the first place. So let's talk about what makes these conversations difficult. In many South Asian families, mental health is not always ignored, but often managed quietly. Someone might be struggling, but the response is to keep going, stay busy, pray, focus on school or work, not tell too many people, or just wait for it to pass. And sometimes, when someone finally does try to talk about it, the response they get may be silence, discomfort, advice, or an immediate attempt to fix the problem. Things like, don't think too much, everyone stresses out about these things, just be strong, go for a walk, what will people say? And I want to consider two potential things here. These responses can feel really dismissive and painful at times. However, they come from a place of fear often, not necessarily lack of love. The fear could be a fear of stigma, fear that something is seriously wrong, fear that the family might be judged, fear that they don't know what to say, or fear that if you name it, it becomes too real. So sometimes what feels like not caring is actually limited emotional language. This doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It just means that the story may be more complicated than they just don't care. I'm curious. What is something someone has said to you or something you've heard in the community that didn't feel helpful in the moment? A few common phrases I usually hear are others have it worse, everyone experiences this kind of stress, sometimes you just need an activity to distract yourself. And when you're compared to other people, it can be painful because it turns the pain into a conversation, into a competition. So if we know that families may not always have the language, how do we begin in a way that gives the conversation the best chance of going somewhere? So let's imagine you're trying to tell a family member that you haven't been feeling like yourself. Maybe you're anxious, burnt out, depressed, overwhelmed, lonely, or just emotionally exhausted. How would you frame that and what would you actually say? I see Vidisha said something about the previous slide that we were on, about what something someone said that didn't feel helpful in the moment. And yeah, don't be difficult, keep it to yourself. These are really common responses because families may not always have the language to support and show that they care for your emotions. So I wonder, if you are trying to share a certain feeling that you might be feeling, how would you frame that to your loved ones? Due to psychological issues, I'm having trouble with my studies, so I need to speak to someone to fix this. This is an interesting way to frame your feelings. You are over here mentioning what you are having issues with, and a goal you have in mind about how you need help. That is helpful. But I wonder, how do you feel they might react when you say psychological issues? Do you think that might be do you think that might be received with fear, apprehension, worry, anger? And I ask this because a lot of us get stuck at this stage. We know what we feel internally, but when it's time to say it out loud, it feels like we need the perfect words. And we worry sometimes that if we say too much, they'll panic. If you say too little, they won't take you seriously. If you use a diagnosis, they'll judge you. If you don't use a diagnosis, they'll minimize it. So it's hard because you're trying to translate what you're feeling into a language that your family may be able to hear and digest. And worry is a really common reaction because they're worried that when you mention that you're having issues, what does that mean? So, starting the conversation is less about the right mental health terms, but more about building a bridge between different emotional languages. So, for example, if you just say, I think I'm depressed, That might be accurate, that might be important. But depending on your family member, that might make them scared, worried, defensive, or confused. So sometimes it helps to begin with everyday language and focus on physical symptoms because that's easy to explain and understand. Things like, I'm sleeping a lot, but I still feel exhausted. I'm feeling more irritable and I don't want to pretend like I'm fine. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now, and I can notice it affecting my work, my relationships, or my health. So the key is essentially to connect the feeling that you might be experiencing to your daily life. So like you said, Vikram, it's a great way to connect it to your daily life by saying that I'm experiencing XYZ and I'm having trouble with my studies. Many family members may not understand a clinical label right away, but they will be able to understand I'm not eating as much as I used to. I'm not sleeping as much as I used to. I'm sleeping a lot more than I used to. I can't focus. I feel like I'm scared all the time. These are tangible feelings that feel more easy to translate. One simple formula is something Vikram mentioned. It is to mention what you're noticing, how it's affecting you, and what you need. So, for example, um, I I know you're trying to help, but when you give me advice, I feel more alone. Could you first ask me what I need? I've been feeling really worried for the past few weeks. It's affecting my sleep and concentration. I don't need a solution, but I would really appreciate if you could listen. These are some ways in which you're talking about what you're feeling, how it's affecting your daily life, and what you need in that moment. There are two things I do want to mention that matter when you're starting the conversation. Firstly, timing matters. Some conversations are not going to go well if they happen in the middle of an argument, or when someone is someone in a rush, or when someone is already activated emotionally. Secondly, choosing the right person matters. It may not be the most obvious family member. Sometimes the first conversation can be with a sibling, a cousin, an aunt, a partner, an uncle, or a family friend. What matters is you want to be able to have that softer entry point into discussing your feelings to be able to feel like you have someone in your corner as you continue this conversation. Now, even when we do all of this, the response may still not be exactly what we hoped for. So let's talk about what happens after you share. Opening up can bring relief, but it can also bring confusion or disappointment. Sometimes people think, once I finally tell my family, I'll feel less alone. And sometimes that does happen. But other times, the person shares something vulnerable and the response is not what they needed. Maybe the family member changes the subject. Maybe they panic. Maybe they say, "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" Maybe they make it about themselves. Maybe they say, "But you have such a good life." And the person who opens up is left thinking, "I did the brave thing. Why do I still feel alone?" I think the important thing that we need to name here is feeling supported does not only depend on sharing, but also how that sharing is received. If you opened up and you still didn't feel fully understood, that doesn't mean you explained it badly. It means the other person might still not know how to receive it. Has anyone experienced opening up and not feeling fully understood? What has that experience been like for you? Even if we're not being able to name it out loud, I imagine many of us have had some or the other version of an experience where we might not feel fully understood even after opening up. So, why do families respond this way? Let's unpack this without excusing harm, but also without oversimplifying it. Families may respond by trying to fix the problem, minimizing it, becoming anxious, or moving quickly into advice. A parent may say, "Okay, then quit your job," or "Okay, just sleep earlier," or "Don't tell anyone," or "Why are you thinking like this?" To the person sharing, that can feel dismissive. It can feel like, "You didn't hear me. You heard a problem to solve, but you didn't hear my pain. But in many South Asian families, care is often expressed through action more than emotional validation. For example, it may look a lot like cutting fruit, making you coffee or chai, sending you a job posting if you've mentioned stresses about work, telling you to eat more frequently if you've mentioned that you're not being able to eat, driving you somewhere if they notice you're not having the energy to do that, or giving practical advice or checking if you've slept. These things can be love, but also they may not be the emotional support that you need in that moment. So, both things can be true. Your family may care deeply, but they still might not know how to respond in a way that feels emotionally supportive. Sometimes we can gently translate what we need. For example, when someone is trying to give you solutions, when you're mentioning your frustration, you can say, I know you're trying to help me by giving me solutions. I appreciate that. Right now, what would help me is if you could just say, that sounds really hard. Or if you could just tell me that what I'm experiencing is okay. This might feel a little vulnerable to say because you don't want to have to educate your family member on how to support you. But keep in mind, they care, they just don't know the vocabulary to show it. They show it through actions. And the goal is to help bridge that language. This might sound simple, but for some families, this is a completely new emotional skill. As we move forward, I wonder what is a small shift that feels open or that you feel open to trying after this. Not necessarily a huge transformation, just a practical small shift when having these conversations. A few common things I notice is maybe it's choosing a calmer time to talk, maybe it's starting with everyday language instead of a diagnosis. What else comes to mind? As a parent, maybe it's asking your child, do you want advice or do you want me to just sit with you right now? Maybe it's accepting that you can't always just go to one family member for every kind of support. Change in families often happen through small repeated moments. Saying something differently once, pausing sometimes before you react, maybe using a less defensive response when you feel like someone is not understanding you. One person, as long as they're willing to try again, change will happen. That brings us to finding a way to move forward. Finding a way forward doesn't mean every family conversation suddenly becomes easy. It means we start being clearer about what we need. It means we understand that not every family member can provide every kind of support. It means we stop treating outside support as a rejection of family. Seeing a therapist, joining a support group, calling a helpline, talking to a friend, or speaking with a physician is not a betrayal. It's self care. It's adding a level of support. Sometimes people feel guilty and think that if I go outside my family for help, does that mean my family failed me? No. You are allowed to have more than one source of care. Families can hold both care and discomfort at the same time. Remember, a parent can love you deeply and still not know what to say. A family member can be scared and still learn. A conversation can go badly the first time, but still improve over time. Change is often gradual. We may be planting seeds long before we see the shift. The goal is not to force a perfect conversation, it's to create space for honesty, for listening, for repair, and support. I'd love to open this up. I know I've shared a lot of information right now, and I want to know what's coming up for you right now. Questions, reflections. You're welcome to ask generally or even share scenarios that you feel like I might not have addressed, or scenarios that you feel like aren't really relevant to what I've shared. We are not able to give individualized clinical advice, but we can definitely think through communication strategies and resources together. I know that in 30 minutes, I've definitely not covered all possible situations. So if you feel like what I've said might not be applicable to you, or you would want more guidance for certain situations, I'd love to discuss it together.
Can I ask a question, Anya, while we are waiting? Uh, I think one of the things, when the person brings up an issue, asks the questions, and starts a conversation, has the courage to start the conversation. But as you said, that it can go one way or another, and the expectation may not be met depending on how the family responds. What happens then at that point uh, with the individual and with the family when that bridge hasn't been built yet, which obviously takes time? So, what advice would you give for that?
I will say, firstly, that that can feel very lonely, especially after you were vulnerable. So, what usually helps is to first take a pause and reflect on how you started that conversation. Also, reflect whether the timing when you spoke was an appropriate time for the other person to be present, as well as if the person you chose to speak to would be the most helpful in that moment. It may be helpful to pause and try again at a calmer time, but you also do not have to keep going back to the same person if they repeatedly show you that they're unable to support you. Sometimes, in the moment, if you feel like you're being shut down, you can say something like, I wanted to talk about this right now because this matters to me. I don't think this conversation is going where I want it to go right now. So let's take a pause. We can try again later because this matters to me, you matter to me, and I want to be able to share this with you. It's also possible that sometimes family members may not be able to be the most helpful first line of support. That's when outside support can become helpful. A therapist, a support group, a trusted friend, physician, mentor, or helpline. You can reach out to these external sources. And on the next slide, I will also be sharing some sources that Samhin has, where these individuals can help guide you on how to go about this conversation with your family members in a way that's individualized, appropriate, and the most supportive for your family member.
So I was going to ask another question, but there is a question in the chart which actually is consistent with what I was going to ask. But please respond to the question that has been posted on the chat.
Yeah. How do you handle a parent or family who will outburst that reaching out to another person or source is a betrayal of the family honor? So this this is a real concern because it's very common in South Asian families where the um sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, it's really common in South Asian families to think more about the societal impact rather than the internal processes that you might be experiencing. Openness is important, but safety and emotional readiness matters too. You need to internally recognize that not every family member has earned access to every vulnerable part of you. You can choose what to share, when to share, and with whom. You can start small, you can write it down and tell them that this is what is important to me. This is what I'm struggling with. I need support. I would appreciate it if you can support me, but if I'm unable to have that conversation with that family member in a way in which it is supportive to me, it is important to recognize that your personal happiness, your personal emotional safety is important. There are ways you can have these conversations without necessarily bringing it to your family member and sharing it as a family honor system. There are ways you can connect with maybe um mental health professionals who will keep it confidential between you and them.
So can I just make a comment about this also, Anya? I think
Please.
this comment reflects a very common uh, 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 trait which is ingrained in our culture, that and which actually becomes a barrier when individual goes for therapy. Even in therapy sessions, they are reluctant to talk about personal matters because it is to them it is perceived as violating the family loyalty and honor. And what do they do when the family says that, how can you talk to somebody else? You're letting us down. Um, uh, and what can the individual do then? Because it can put them in a helpless position. And how do we uh, overcome that impasse,
Yeah,
right?
I think considering the stigma in South Asian families regarding mental health, it's important to validate this fear with your loved ones without letting stigma make the decision. You want them to know that you understand where they're coming from when they say that, like, I'm worried it's going to affect what other people will say. You validate that concern. However, you don't let that be the reason the decision is not made to seek help. A few ways you can say this is, I understand you might be worried about judgment. I worry about that too. But I don't want the fear of other people's opinions to stop me from getting help because I need support right now. And I'm hoping there's a way we can work together to achieve this. Another way we can also do this is after acknowledging the concerns about judgment and other people's opinion, you can say, we do not have to tell everyone, other people don't need to know. This can stay private, but I need support. The most important thing is advocating for yourself even when it might be hard. You tell your parents or you tell your loved ones that I know the consequences of this getting out and how you might be concerned about that. However, I'm in a situation right now where I need more support. Sometimes privacy is important in families, but privacy and secrecy are different. Privacy protects dignity, but secrecy can sometimes increase shame, which can send you down a worse rabbit hole.
Okay, I also want to add that this whole process of trying to reassure your family that you're not dishonoring them by discussing with a therapist or somebody else, and this whole process is a slow process, and it's not going to be resolved in one conversation. And I think one of the things that the individual can do is for each other to not take things to heart and continue that dialogue and continue that process. And hopefully they will bridge that gap and see that, well, it's not necessarily, being disloyal by talking to somebody else. And it's not easy. This is so hard. I've experienced it in the families. I've heard about it also, and it's extremely difficult to overcome. And and you and I giving this tips is not going to make it like super easy. I can guarantee you that it's so ingrained in our culture. It's very difficult. But that doesn't mean that we give up and not try. And I think just continue the dialogue. So there's another question, I think. Is it? No.
No. Um, yeah, and I completely agree with Dr. Makhija. I've personally experienced my own struggles with advocating for my mental health, and it's not been an easy journey. I'm not trying to say that my journey is what other people have experienced or will experience. What I'm trying to say is, in order to be able to have these conversations, like Dr. Makhija said, It's important to not take reactions to heart. Reactions that we get from our family members are sometimes ingrained in how they were raised and in the society that in the societal values they share and hold so strongly within themselves. So it's important to know that what they are saying is not a reflection of is not just a reflection of what you shared, but more so a broader reaction from the context in which they were raised. There's one question that comes up really often when I have these conversations is, what if my parents sacrificed so much for me and I feel guilty saying I'm unhappy? It's so common in South Asian families where you recognize the struggle and the situations that your parents have come from or your family members have come from, that you feel almost guilty for feeling a certain way. A lot of people confuse emotional honesty with disrespect. Sharing pain is not disrespectful, it's an attempt to become closer. It's important to recognize that them sacrificing for your upbringing is something you're grateful for. But that's why it's hard. Struggling doesn't mean you're ungrateful. You're not blaming them, you're trying to let them in and get closer.
I think while the individual is trying to build that bridge, parents also need to take a step back and maybe have, they have learned, especially the first generation immigrant parents, they have learned this about, the rules being violated, loyalty being violated. I think that is something that the parents can learn to listen to their young adult or teenage child about such conversations and not take it to heart and listen with an open mind and give them the benefit of doubt and without taking it to heart. That may help with the step of building that bridge. you know.
Yeah, and it happens so common it is so common when a parent hears pain but instantly reframes it as blame, because their reactions become, where did we go wrong? Are you saying we were bad parents? And the goal is to recognize from both ends that this is not a blame game, but this is one person reaching out for support. This is one person saying that this might be hard to hear. I care about your reactions, but I need the conversation to be focused on what I am feeling. It's important to sometimes take a pause in the conversation if the two parties are getting escalated, to separate and rethink and reflect on where their reactions are actually stemming from.
And there's another side to it that if I may comment on it, like a lot of times when young individuals, kids in high school or young adults, college students, I've seen this in medical students also, they would go to their family expressing their experiences of subjective distress, emotional distress, stress, whether it's from college or relationships or what have you. And the parents immediate and so for a parent it doesn't feel good to hear the distress of their child, and so they quickly want to put the fire out by making recommendations. Oh, just drink more water. And these are actual examples that I've heard over the years. Just pray or just focus on your homework. This is the passing phase, it'll go away. So they kind of stop listening to their loved one. So what I would suggest is to listen openly and reflect back to the young man. Oh, you're feeling this way, and then engage in that conversation instead of trying to dampen the conversation by giving a quick solution. And then they're not hearing and support the individual's need for seeking such support, or sometimes they may need even outside treatment like therapy. Not everybody with emotional problems needs therapy or a psychiatrist, but some people may do. And then for the parent, if the young individual is asking for that you should support that effort and not discourage that, because stigma also gets in the way. We don't want to do that. What will people say, you know, if you do that?
Yeah, and that is such an important distinction because a lot of families say, I love you through, or like, I care about you through actions, but the person who's struggling might still be craving someone to listen. And sometimes, if you constantly feel like your caregiver is showing you that they care through actions or advice, you can say, I really appreciate everything you're doing for me, but what I need the most is not advice or action, but to hear that you understand that what I'm experiencing is hard or is frustrating or is overwhelming or whatever it might be. Or even like, when you make me food or when you bring me water, I know that you're showing me that you love me, but I also need to be able to have a conversation about this with you. Because you're not trying to reject the way they show love, you're just trying to add another language of support.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Another thing that I want to talk about when we speak about parents is, how can parents talk to their children if they're worried about their mental health? So, when a parent is worried about a child's mental health, it's a very delicate balance because you want to be able to show them that, you're a resource and you're someone they can come to without accusing them that something is going wrong. So, instead of being like, why are you acting like this? Or you are always in your room, or what's wrong right now? You can kind of ask, I'm noticing you've been spending a lot of time in your room. I just wanted to check in. Are you busy? What's going on? Or, I'm not here to lecture you right now. I just noticed that, you've not really been finishing your lunch that I pack in school, and I want to understand, is there something else that you're enjoying? Are you not feeling that hungry anymore? It's important to come from a place of curiosity rather than concern when dealing with young people, because the first conversation is not the conversation they're going to tell you everything, but you want to show that you're someone they can come back to and talk to. So the goal is to show that you're curious and you care, but not that you're labeling them in a certain way, or that you're deciding that something's wrong or deciding that they made a mistake.
So, Anya, would you like to tell attendees about other resources, some of the blogs you have written that might be of interest to people to read further on these subjects?
Yes. So, Samhin also has several resources available, including our blogs, where where there are different authors who write about different topics that they have expertise or knowledge about or have researched about. There's a helpline, which is not a crisis line. For crisis support, please call or text 988 or 911 for immediate danger. But the Samhin helpline is a resource where you are most likely going to be connected with Dr. Makhija or our other volunteers, and you can talk about what's bothering you. It's a very informal call, and it's to help support you in what way you need. We also have multiple different support groups. Dr. Makhija will be placing the links for these in the group chat so that you can access them. Our support groups are for many different concerns you might be having. We have support groups for youth, we have support groups for suicide loss survivors, we have support groups for divorced women. We have many different resources for you to kind of find a group where you can speak to someone and, feel understood.
I want to add that these calls, when they come on helpline or even the participation in support groups, all this is confidential. Whatever you discuss there, it is not revealed to anyone outside. So you can feel safe to be heard without judgment, without worries about your privacy being violated. I posted two links, but audience attendees are welcome to explore other blogs that are there. I just posted two links of the blogs that are pertinent to this particular conversation that we are having today.
And I've placed the links to the helpline and the support groups as well, if you would like to explore those.
Yeah, 988 is a good number to call for an emotional crisis or when there are thoughts of suicide. and it's 24/7, and you can call multiple time. They have services in different languages available. Um, they are trained volunteers in counseling to help diffuse. Most of the time, the issue is diffused, and I think I think 2% of the calls are diverted to emergency, like the local police, if there's imminent danger to the self or others. You can call 911 if there's immediate danger to self or others.
Mm-hmm. Um, one more, I mean, not one more thing, but I guess the one thing I hope you take away from this session is that these conversations do not have to be perfect to matter. Sometimes, forget sometimes, most of the time, the first conversation is awkward, clumsy, the person does not respond the way that we hoped. But every time you name mental health with a little less shame and a little more compassion, you create more room for the next conversation. And in families where mental health has been managed quietly for generations, even a small opening can be really meaningful.
I think in the few minutes that we have, we welcome questions from participants, attendees. Uh, you know, we'll wait for a few minutes if somebody thinks about a question. You know.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing so maybe we can chat without the screen. And yeah, I'm curious if there are any other questions that come up for you, if you feel like there's an area that might be challenging that we have not covered yet, or in any way that we can support you.
I mean, in spite of all this, difficulties and awkwardness, but one thing we know for sure that sharing eases the burden that we carry when we don't share. You know, for any kinds of emotional distress, dealing with losses, when you share, it seems to take the burden off your shoulders. So there are no questions coming up. If there are no questions, uh, I would like to thank Anya for a wonderful presentation on this, common issue and difficulty of having this conversation, and which is a very common difficulty that most of us experience in our lives. And I want to thank East Brunswick Public Library for giving us this opportunity to address the issue for our community. And thank you for recording to make it available for all those who are not able to attend the today's session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Makhija, for providing these opportunities for us to disseminate this knowledge through SAMHIN. And thank you so much for the participants for being here and for being willing to engage with this topic. We are always here to support people, and we want people to know that this resource is always available. We're always accessible, and we welcome any feedback, any concerns.
I may also add, Maritza, that
Mhm.
I mean these were just limited resources we shared. On samhin.org, we have a lot of resources available, which we are in the process of expanding even further over the next 3 months. There'll be a lot more resources. So I encourage people to go online on samhin.org and go to the resources section. Then you'll find resources for different regions in the country, even your local areas. And please, you might find some helpful information there.